Hello, good evening. I'd like to call to order tonight's April 16th, 2015 Santa Barbara Board of Harbor Commissioners meeting. Ms. Przinski, would you call roll, please?
Yes, Bill Spicer.
Here.
Jim Sloan. Here. Corey Bantolin. Here. Betsy Kramer. Here. Stephen McIntosh.
Here.
Helene Webb. Here. And Dennis Power will not make it tonight.
Very good. Mr. Reedman, any changes to the agenda tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. There are no changes this evening.
Okay. At this point is public comment for anything that's not on the agenda, and I believe Ms. Morgan Green has asked to speak. Please come on up.
Good evening. I don't really want to be here, but I am, so I will be brief. I'm here about the patrolling gunboats, the Coast Guard gunboats that were here last week disrupting recreational mariners in front of the city. And basically, I've seen a lot of communication running back and forth about how a race course at the yacht club was disrupted and racers were frightened and all of this. Frankly, I think that's immaterial and unimportant. It's what first got my wind up, but I've given it a lot of thought. And I come from a military family, and I've lived a lot of places where there were a lot of big guns going off. My concern is, and my only reason for being here, is civilian endangerment. Putting Santa Barbara civilians within range of military weapons that could be fired in any direction at any time. Now, this is, of course, if there was a firefight between terrorists and the coasties. Well, there's a presumption here. The premise is that cruise ships here need protection, or there would not be a regulation for these security zones or these arms patrols. Therefore, the patrol boats carry weapons to fire if attackers try to reach the ships. Therefore, the patrol boats will open fire if necessary. I did some research. Here's the current weaponry carried by the U.S. Coast Guard vessels doing this type of duty. There's the M14 tactical rifle, adapted for marine use. It's fully automatic. It's fired from the shoulder or from a tripod mount. Maximum effective range is 503 yards. There's the FNM 240 machine gun, 7.62 by 51 millimeter, bipod or tripod mount. Maximum range, 2.31 miles. The M2 heavy machine gun, a 50 caliber Brownie, fondly known as Ma Deuce by troops. It shoots 450 to 575 rounds per minute. The effective range is 2,200 yards, or 1.25 miles. The reason these patrol boats are here is to create a secure port around our visiting cruise ships. We have no secure port, as you know it. A segregated area with secured docks, with fences, with gates, with guards, away from the general recreational public. We don't have that. So these patrols, they create the security zone around these ships to create a secure port. However, the effect on Santa Barbara is very bad. We do not have the facilities to take care of this without careful consideration and careful actions. On a personal note, I was one of the many recreational sailors and others confronted by the patrol boats around the Princess Line ship here on Wednesday, April 8. Like me, in this heavily used recreational area far from the ship, and within range of those military weapons I just listed, there are typically beachgoers, swimmers, kayakers, paddleboarders, kiteboarders, recreational sailors, recreational fishermen, and commercial fishing vessels, not to mention people eating in restaurants along the shore, people walking along the shore. When I was looking at this patrol and he was speaking to me on a bullhorn and the weapon was on the boat, was not leveled at me. I don't think that's material in this case. I thought to myself, this is nuts. What about all these people around me if I were a terrorist and these guys open fire? A potential nightmare like that is completely unnecessary. Given the choice of selecting a spot to perch, cruise ships can anchor much farther offshore to discourage attacks from shore-based evildoers. Frankly, where they anchor now, you could get to them wearing scuba gear from Ledbetter Beach, and nobody could see you. Attach a mine to the hull, and you're gone. Farther off is better. They also have large and fast shore boats to bring visitors quickly to Santa Barbara and back in open sea conditions. There's no need to anchor so close. I've heard it said that the cruise ships need to anchor close because it's rough weather out there and they might not be able to service their clientele. I was on a cruise in the Baltic last year. We were due to sail into a port. There was port activity. They were improving the port. They asked the ship to anchor so far out it wouldn't be convenient for them. It was announced over the loudspeaker, "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the ship will skip this port of call." This is standard in the industry. If we have a very stormy day and a ship is anchored 2.5 miles out and it can't stop here, well, gee, it happens in the industry. It is not unknown. What I am saying here is, if ships need armed security, and let's not play euphemisms, the security zone we're talking about is a designated battle zone. This is where the Coast Guard will open fire if they need to. Let's skip the euphemism, just plain speaking.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Let me ask you to start to wrap this up, please.
I'm just about done.
Okay.
The boundary of ships anchoring off this shore should be the effective firing range of the Coast Guard's weaponry on the patrol boats, plus the 500 yards, because they could be 500 yards from the ship when they start to fire, plus a zone that the city, I think, should designate in offshore waters of Santa Barbara, where you typically find concentrated people. This is well within negotiating and discussion within the abilities of the city and the cruise ships. There's no reason they have to anchor so close. I hope the city investigates this and pursues this. There are two other very brief items. One is, it was told to me by a woman who is a sailor locally. She sailed around the world twice. She's a nurse. She's in her 80s. She's not a young, flirty thing. She heard the patrolmen afterwards on shore of these Coast Guard patrols laughing and giving each other high fives and telling each other how much fun they had. I would ask if the City Harbor Department would please talk to this woman, Gretchen. Helene Webb, your commissioner, knows her. Find the facts from her, and if this is true, I think it would be entirely appropriate for our Harbor Department to notify their superior officer in Long Beach. I'm the daughter of an infantry colonel who saw action in 2 wars. If anybody under his command behaved that way, he'd have their, if you pardon me, guts for garters. And I think it would send a very valuable message to the Coast Guard that we take this seriously, therefore they should take this seriously. And if that laughing and high fives proves true, it does not indicate a very professional state of mind of the coasties who were involved. The other thing is the advance notice. The city did not know of these patrol boats coming. Neither did the police, neither did anybody. The Coast Guard office here did not know. I spoke to everyone. It strikes me that we had military-looking vessels here with military-looking people and very military-looking guns come into the harbor, launch, and leave this harbor. Nobody confronted them. Nobody asked them anything. Now, I'm not criticizing our Harbor Department. I am not. What I am saying is that there should never be a time, and I think the city should speak to the Coast Guard about this, never be a time where there's an armed contingent in our area without all of our officials be giving plenty of notice in beforehand. Now, this really has nothing to do with anything except this.
I am going to ask you to
I'm
complete.
wrapping up
Okay.
right now. And that is, if they don't know they're coming, we can't tell if these people who are deploying weapons are really coasties or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. We move on to approval of the minutes, and I would ask for a motion.
So moved. Oh, that's right.
I will pass it on.
I was there as well, so I'll second that or make it whatever it was.
Very good. We have a first and it passes. Moving on to business, we'll start with department update and the director's report. Mr. Riedman.
Good evening, Commissioners. On March 23rd, Carl Treiberg, Harbor Patrol Supervisor Steve McCullough, and Officer Rick Hubbard and I took Councilmember Bendy White on a patrol boat tour, orientation tour, if you will, of the harbor and the shoreline area east of Stearns Wharf. We visited the Marina One construction area, observed dredging operations, looked at the East Beach anchorage area and the permitted mooring areas, among other things. Councilmember White also expressed support for establishing the Harbor Patrol Vessel Replacement Fund, which we discussed at last month's meeting, and he expressed strong support for that method of saving up for a patrol boat. And we did establish that fund on April 9th, so that has been put into the FY16, FY17 budget at $75,000 a year to start that replacement fund. On the local coastal program committee on March 25th, planning staff met with and waterfront staff convened a meeting of the local coastal program committee, Commissioners Sloan, McIntosh, and Webb. And planning staff distributed gigantic binders of the draft LCP instructions, which were a bit intimidating at first, and asked for review and comment on a pretty short time frame. But fortunately, it was just limited to areas in the waterfront jurisdiction, which was a lot less than the whole entire document that was given to us. So just in terms of background, as part of the LCP update, the 1996 Harbor Master Plan will be retired, and relevant policies from the master plan will be carried forward and incorporated into the updated LCP. Meanwhile, we've been looking at other policies that are no longer applicable and deleting them. Fortunately, like I said, a relatively small section pertains to the waterfront jurisdiction, and many of these deletions were presented to the full commission on July 17th of last year, as you may recall. Other than that, staff and LCP committee reconvened yesterday afternoon and reviewed approximately 7 recommended changes to the document, and we plan to bring those back to the full commission next month. And in addition, in May, we plan on having an update on the water conservation efforts at the Waterfront Department and give you a recap on the Harbor Nautical Swap Meet and Hazmat Turn-In Day, as well as Operation Clean Sweep results. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you, Scott. Next, we'll move to the Business Services Report. Mr. Bossy.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I have a short business services report for you this evening with 2 items, and we're going to start off with pedestrians and autos, basically visitation to Stearns Wharf. This is a question we routinely get. A lot of our parking staff receives this on a regular basis. Hey, how many people come out on Stearns Wharf? How many automobiles come out on Stearns Wharf? So about 4 years ago, staff took the initiative and installed what is known as a TrafSys people counter, and it's a camera that sits at the base of Stearns Wharf, just far enough out on the pedestrian walkway, and it uses thermal imaging to pick up and tally people, and it only gets them going one way, so it's motion sensitive as well as thermal heat, and it picks up even if you're walking arm in arm. It can split the 2 of you up and can recognize that it's 2 people. It picks up on everybody's unique body temperature. So with that, we tally, allows us to tally up people by the hour, by the day, whatever breakdown you could possibly imagine, and it's real time. So here are the results for pedestrians on Stearns Wharf for the calendar year 2014. And you'll see each month, January through December up there, and the number in parentheses to the side of that is the rank in month. The number 1 would be your highest pedestrian traffic on the wharf, number 12 being your lowest. And a lot of similarity to calendar year 2013, a few months flip-flop here and there. But again, you'll see number 1 is August at 140,000 people. Just over 140,000 people going out onto the wharf in just the month of August. The grand total is 1,093,499, and that totals about 4,000 more people than calendar year 2013, so a slight increase. The lowest month on last year was February at 58,073. I think as far as the highest in calendar year 2013, I believe it was July. So July and August tend to flip-flop on occasion. But it's always, that 1, 2, 3, 4 is kind of how you see it. June, July, August, and then May and September usually coming in our top 5. So that's pedestrians on the wharf. Going over to our automobiles on the wharf, our parking staff tracks this through the number of tickets that are distributed at the base of Stearns Wharf. With the new installation of our ski data system that was just completed a few weeks ago, it's a much more upgraded system. We'll be able to really dive down into the details as far as automobiles. This does not include delivery vehicles. They generally don't take tickets because they're there on an everyday basis. However, with our new system, everybody that comes through is going to pull a ticket and will be programmed. The operator will program what that car is, whether it's a police car, hopefully not, or a fire truck, delivery trucks, and things of that nature. So we'll be able to really dial in. So you'll see here the highest month was July with 25,732 automobiles going out onto Stearns Wharf. Overall, we've got 263,883. And that's a 5% increase over calendar year 2013, which equates to about 14,000 additional vehicles going out onto Stearns Wharf, which is quite an increase. That July average at 25,732 averages out over that 31 days, 830 cars per day. And you can go on and break it down hour to hour, but I'm not going to do that for you. You can call me if you want that data. But it is an interesting thing to have. We'll be monitoring both of these numbers as we move into the construction at the base of Stearns Wharf and see how that impacts visitation on the wharf, which hopefully it will not have too much of an impact. Now, the second item on the business services report are changes to our Ledbetter parking lot. As you're aware, the Ledbetter parking lot is part of a joint use agreement we have with Santa Barbara City College, not just us, but the city as a whole. It was originally signed back in 1962, and it's had a number of amendments since then. The use of Ledbetter lot was discussed even prior to them being constructed, so this goes back quite some time. But as you all know, that lot, our Ledbetter lot, is routinely at capacity, especially the first 8 weeks of Santa Barbara City College semester. We do allow City College parking permits in that lot as well as our Harbor West lot. So first 8 weeks, it's very packed. Throughout the rest of the semester, it's got a good overall capacity rating as well. And because of that, we've heard a lot of complaints from permit holders as well as the public that there's just no parking down there. I want to use my parking permit and go to Ledbetter to enjoy a barbecue, a picnic, or just to paddle or swim. So working with the Santa Barbara City College, their business services division, we installed 10 We installed a number of parking signs down in the final 10 spaces, the west end of Ledbetter parking lot, right down here in the red. And the signs currently read waterfront parking permit only. So City College students are not allowed to park there. And this has resulted in an increase of usage from regular patrons, the public, waterfront permit holders. We've had nothing but positive feedback from those folks that now allows them to come down. They can park. They can do whatever they choose to do on that end of the parking lot. But again, we worked with City College to make this happen. And one thing that we're going to change about it is our facilities folks are going to go out there and put sleeves where they're currently stationed, the poles. So we'll be able to put in and remove the poles depending on the season. For instance, in the summer, when you don't get a lot of City College usage, those poles will be pulled out and it'll just be for the general public. So one change that's happened in our parking lot down at Ledbetter, and again, it's gotten some good feedback, so we're happy with that. And that concludes my business services report. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bossy? Commissioner McIntosh.
Chair, I have a quick question for Mr. Bossy, and you might have covered this. I apologize if you did at the last Harbor Commission meeting, but at the Wharf Merchants Association meeting that I attended with Mr. Reedman, last month, I believe it was, you staff had presented the idea of no longer requiring a validation of the parking tickets. Is that still on course, and when does that happen?
Down here. Chair Spicer, Commissioner McIntosh, yes, that still is on. It's part of our fee resolution for fiscal year 2016. So that would, if council agrees to that, that would go into effect July 1st. It's a great question because we actually had a meeting with the Stearns Wharf merchants, their every other month meeting this morning, and we talked about that again just to keep them apprised. They're fine with the change. It actually eliminates one extra thing for them to do during the day, and they're happy with that. I think they understand and hope for the fact that with the 90 minutes, without having the validation and just a simple 90 minutes free, it's going to turn over parking spots more regularly. People will come on and come off in a more regular fashion. So they're behind the program, and it'll go into effect July 1st. Okay. If it's approved by council as part of the budget package.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, I just had a quick question. I'm sure that took some negotiating to get those 10 spaces. Has there been any feedback from City College, and is it possible to get more spaces in the future if we deem this successful?
Chair Spicer, there hasn't been any feedback on the negative side from City College or from students complaining about the loss of parking. They are obviously in a parking crunch and have been for many years, and with the increase in enrollment there, that's going to continue to be a problem. I do sit on a group with city staff as well as City College folks that look at transportation alternatives, and they are coming out with a number of programs. One of those being right now, staff parking permits are allowed to be used in our garden parking lot on a trial basis. And then they can go out onto Cabrillo and pick up the MTD shuttle. It's not really heavily used. They didn't anticipate that it would solve all their problems, but they get about 5 per 6 per day. They're looking to expand that to their students in the fall, but they would have more of a regular pickup. So they've got a number of things going to look at their parking issues, but they've been fine with it. And I think there might be the option or the idea to look at more parking spaces in Ledbetter. They were fine with the 10, didn't have a problem with it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for your report very much. Mr. Triberg in Facilities Management.
Good evening, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. The Corps of Engineers dredging contractor, AIS Construction Company, recently completed the spring cycle dredging in the middle of March. Their production rate of 12,000 cubic yards per day was the highest they've had ever since they started in 2004. So they finally figured it out after 10 years. They removed the contracted amount of 120,000 cubic yards in 10 days and immediately moved on to demobilization. That included removing and or burying all the dredge pipe on east and west beaches, removing the submarine line across the channel, and vacating the dredge yard. They also tied up all of their equipment, their dredge and the support vessels inside the sand spit, which people see every summer. But that equipment's going to be leaving soon. Pacific Dredge bought out AIS recently, and they are going to do some serious upgrades to that equipment. Week after next, the dredge, La Encina, is going to be towed down to the Pacific Dredge's boatyard in San Diego, and they're going to put a new hull on it. And the dredge tender Kathleen's going to be taken down there as well, and they're going to either repower it or replace it. So it's encouraging to see Pacific Dredge investing in this operation, and I think they're in it for the long haul, which is very, very encouraging. Normally the dredge yard is completely removed during this time of the year, during the summer, but Lash Construction Company is going to take it over for a while. They are the contractor that is reconstructing both the Mason Street Bridge and the Cabrillo Boulevard Bridge over Mission Creek, and they're going to stockpile about 3,000 cubic yards of fill dirt in there over the beginning of the summer. Hopefully they'll remove it by about the end of July, and then everything will be restored to normal for the rest of the summer until we resume dredging again in the fall, late October. Over in the harbor, we just started remodeling the Marina 4 restroom. The Marina 4 restroom is located on the north side of the harbor, and it's somewhat unique in that it not only serves the slip holders, but it's a public restroom and has been used quite a bit lately. It was first constructed in the 1960s, remodeled in the 1980s, and upgraded mainly to meet Americans with Disabilities Act requirements at that time. The visitation has gone up considerably in the harbor these last few years, and that particular restroom has really taken a beating. So we're going to remodel it. Southwest Construction submitted a low bid of $168,000 and began demolition yesterday. The project is going to result in a restroom that looks a lot like the Marina 3 restroom in the restrooms in the Brophy Brothers building that was just done a couple of years ago. So we're going to have kind of a consistent architectural theme and similar fixtures and materials. The project also includes a lot of water conservation measures, fixtures that conserve water, and most importantly is we're going to convert the potable water, part of the potable water system, to recycled water for the toilets, and that's a pretty significant upgrade. The city's Water Resources Division provides incentives for these kind of water conservation fixtures as well as conversion to recycled water. So we're currently working with them to figure out just what that incentive will be, and that'll should help offset the cost of the overall project. This project is funded through our capital improvement program. It was in the FY 2015 budget for $200,000. The project will hopefully come in a little bit under that, and that money will be carried over to the next restroom remodel, which is Marina 2, scheduled for FY 2017. And that concludes my report this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Triberg? Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. On the dredge, since Pacific Dredge took it over, is it their intent to leave it here in the off-season like the other company did, or are they going to shuttle it back and forth?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, I think they're somewhat realistic about the potential for other work for that dredge, which is rather limited. So in general, I think they're going to leave it here over the summer, unless if they can find work. AIS took their dredge up to Morro Bay one year, we may recall. Yeah. But in general, it's not quite big enough for them to compete for the Ventura and Channel Islands Harbor jobs.
Okay.
But, you know, they're going to invest quite a bit of money in it, so they may be looking for other work.
Oh, that's great. And then on the dredge yard, is that going to interfere with any of the 4th of July activities at all, leaving that up?
The dredge yard is actually kind of wrapped into the exclusion area for 4th of July. Okay. So it winds up becoming part of the perimeter fencing. So it really won't take up any more of the beach than the security fencing takes up to begin with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Webb.
Thank you for your report, Carl. Is there any chance of doing the recycling of the water in the other restrooms as time goes by in the marina, in the harbor?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Webb, yeah, there absolutely is. You know, in hindsight, we probably should have done it for Marina 3 when we did Marina 3 5 or 6 years ago. But when we do Marina 2, we'll certainly look at that. And we're not only going to convert to recycled water for the Marina 4 restroom, we're also going to capture some of the landscaping in that area as well. So we're going to expand the use to the maximum extent that we can.
Thank you, Carl. Wonderful report. Mr. Kronman, Harbor Operations.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, if it's May, it's time for Operation Clean Sweep, and this will be our 9th annual Clean Sweep effort, a voluntary seafloor debris cleanup effort that we're just wrapping up. This will be our circumnavigation of the harbor year. In other words, we're going to be out on QRNS. I'm getting a lot of interest from volunteer groups that have worked with us before, because this is kind of a celebration of having gone all the way around the harbor for the first time. As you can see here, the debris ranges from all kinds of things, barbecues and crab traps and the occasional satellite dish and microwave oven and what have you. But we've got dive service companies joining us to do the diving. We have plenty of volunteers. And we're looking forward to a great day on May 2nd. If folks want to volunteer, they can certainly call me. This is one shot we have, and this is the area we're going to be working on. And the cool thing is, where you see Clean Sweep 2015, that's going to be us on May 2nd. And then next year we go back to the where we started, which will be really exciting to see if we've made a dent. Hopefully we have made a dent, considering we've retrieved 15.7 tons so far. This should push us over 16 tons. And what do you get? You get back to Marina 4 next year. So let's hope that next time it's half or less than that. And so we'll be moving forward with that on May 2nd. If anybody has any questions or wants to volunteer, they can call me directly at 897-2587 or email me at the waterfront. We also have the Harbor Nautical Swap Meet the following Saturday on May 9th. That's also our 9th annual event, and it continues to gain popularity. We had 58 vendors last year, and it's a benefit for the Harbor Merchants Association, who in turn help coordinate great eats, if you will. We get bagels and coffee from the roasting company. The Berryman chips in with a ton of fruit, oranges and bananas, and there are tons of donuts. Those seem to go quickly for some reason. And so the public is welcome to come down and partake. We're getting sign-ups already. Again, that's May 9th in the Marina 3 parking lot. Vendor spaces are only $10, so if you know folks or if anybody sees this, reads about it, we already sent out a press release. Please know it's only $10 to get a parking stall-sized vendor spot. A lot of people like to pay $20 and bring their vehicle in and dump out of the back of their vehicle into one spot and leave their vehicle in the other. That's certainly fine. It's an opportunity for slip permittees to unload their dock boxes before the real boating season is fully upon us. And also, along with this event is our annual Hazmat Turn-In Day. We'll have a hazmat truck staged there. We're working on getting all that arranged. And so slip permittees will be getting the proverbial golden ticket in their May billing insert. And so we look forward to a lot of HHW and used oil and what have you being deposited in that hazmat truck during this event as well. So if you have questions about that as well, you can call me at 897-2587 or email me at the waterfront. And that concludes my report for this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Croman. Any questions? Commissioner Webb.
I would encourage people to volunteer for the clean sweep. It's really interesting what we find. A lot of octopus in bottles and octopi. And then you can always sell what you found at the swap meet next week. So thank you for those events.
Anybody?
Yeah, Chair Spicer, I just wanted to ask real quickly, the funding for your household hazardous waste drop-off program, is that still coming from the state of California?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, yes.
Mr. Croman, I was curious, what is the cost of to the department for Operation Clean Sweep?
Mr. Chair, I'd be ballparking this, but I want to say for the lunches and the roll-off, and this year, thank you for mentioning, we may hire a vessel because we're way out on QRNS. We may hire a vessel, a big one, to tie up there so we can put all of the debris into the dumpster right there. I'm saying in the ballpark of $500-600.
Quite a bargain.
Yes, it is.
Very good. Thank you.
It's the volunteer thing. That's the great thing about it, the volunteer
Absolutely.
spirit.
Yeah. Moving on, we have some new business. And Jeanette, would you read the recommendation?
Item 6, designated fishing zones on Stearns Wharf. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive a report on the history and status of fishing from Stearns Wharf, and B, recommend City Council approve an ordinance designating fishing zones on Stearns Wharf.
And that would be Mr. Cronman.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, by way of background, in 1973, Stearns Wharf sustained one of its many terrible fires. This one was a really bad one. In fact, owing to a lot of factors, it wasn't reopened until 1981. And in 1981, there were sort of de facto or informal fishing zones established on the wharf, one being near the seaward end or at the seaward end of the wharf, and one at the shoreward end of the wharf. And the key word here is informal, because over the years, fishermen have tended to congregate in those areas quite naturally, and when informed either by maintenance staff or harbor patrol that they might be fishing in an area that wasn't designated for fishing, they would move. Well, over the years, folks have tended to spread out to areas where they can cause danger to themselves or danger to other folks, fishing behind buildings, fishing from the valet parking lot at the harbor restaurant, fishing from the roadway, fishing at the Y, where people, turn from the roadway onto the shoreward finger. And then lately, it's actually the reason it's really come to the fore is we had a couple folks who have basically said, where's the authority? You can't tell me not to fish here, and gotten a little bit obstinate about it. And so what we've done in response to that is decided what needs to happen here is we need to officially designate these fishing zones. And so I think, for safety purposes and for enforceability, quite frankly, because Harbor Patrol is powerless to cite. They can warn and educate if they want, but they really don't have any citing powers because there is no municipal code covering this. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to advance an ordinance, working with the City Attorney's Office, of course, to City Council through the Ordinance Committee that actually establishes designated fishing zones on Stearns Wharf. These are included in your report as Attachment 1, and they're also up on the screen in front of you this evening, the zones we would be proposing. Now, a line of piles, if you look at it in a straight line from like the top, from a plan view, that's called a bent. A row of piles going across the wharf, let's say, is called a bent. And then, of course, come pile caps, deck boards, and stringers, to make a pier or a wharf. And so the bent numbers you're seeing up here are what we would anticipate are easy reference points for Harbor Patrol, for fishermen, and what have you. They essentially, on the seaward end, they start out behind the bait and tackle shop. They bend in a little bit, and then they go all the way to the seaward end. And you can see the bent numbers up here, but essentially this is on the shoreward finger. These are the outermost bents on the shoreward finger. Reflecting the fact that these have been historical fishing zones is the fact there are fish cleaning stations at both locations that have been used for many, many years. So all we're really doing here is looking to codify what has informally been designated as the designated fishing zones in the past. And so one also important part of the ordinance language that you see on the back side of your attachment that has this map on it, this drawing, is that we're going to propose language, and again, I'll be working with the city attorney on this to refine the ordinance language, that would allow the waterfront director the discretion to alter this if he needed to, so that we're not locked into this. I think a classic example would be if the Sea Center had a big gala of some kind, and they needed to utilize, with the permission of the waterfront, utilize all that deck space on the shoreward end of the finger, that the waterfront director would have that authority to allow that and call it no fishing for Saturday night or something like that. So that's really the long and short of it. And with your approval, as I mentioned, we will work with the city attorney's office to get this in ordinance language and a council agenda report and move forward in the interests of safety and clarity to designate fishing zones on Stearns Wharf. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Proman? Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to do here. What about, do we ever have it so that there's so many people fishing out there that it gets too crowded? So would there be a case as in when the Department of Fish and Wildlife have their free fishing days? So would we have so many people out there that we would need to open up additional areas? Have we seen that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Sloan, I doubt that. The free fishing day is typically a day where you don't need a license to fish, and you don't need a license to fish as it is on any pier or man-made structure surrounded on three sides by water. But that being said, if there were an event that kind of, like let's say there was a bonita run on the pier, right, and everybody who loves to sport fish ran down to the pier, the director has the authority to widen areas, shrink areas, designate areas he would wish to have per what we're proposing here today.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I heard where we might close an area. I wanted to make sure that we could open them up if we needed to as well. Should, as you said, we have a lot of people that come in. And the thing about the free fishing days is, you're right, it's no license, but they advertise that on their website and things like that. So they're trying to encourage people and bring them out. So even though you don't need a license on any of the piers, they are trying to encourage sport fishing. So,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, if I may add too, I believe it says in your report, we've run this by Frank Drew at Wharf Bait and Tackle, and he's supportive of it as well. So he's on board with that. We can expand it or contract it as need be.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner
I think this is an excellent idea, particularly if Frank is supportive of it. and it's particularly helpful in terms of wildlife and having control there. When people are fishing wherever, it makes it quite difficult. So thank you very much. And I would move that we recommend this to the City Council.
I'll second it.
Quick question before we take a vote. Mr. Crummond, the any issues with patrol? Does this add to their, does this unduly add to their workload?
Mr. Chair, the opposite, quite frankly.
Okay.
It enables them to do the job they're trying to do, because right now they can warn and educate. They can educate, they can't even really warn because there's no ordinance backing them up. So this will give them the tools they need to do the job they need to do.
Okay, very good. Well, we have a motion and a second, so we are at a vote. So all in favor of the recommendation as stated, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? Very good. This
I
passes.
just have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
So will there be this signage posted out there showing where the designation, I assume there is, but.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I was out there today with my colleague, Mr. Treiberg, and there are plenty of signs that say no fishing, and we're probably going to remove some of those. There are probably too many signs that say no fishing, but all we need to really do is in the areas that say no fishing, add a municipal code citation to it, SBMC 1713, whatever it turns out to be. And then I think in addition, we're considering making small signs that show designated fishing area, both on the seaward and shoreward fingers. Sure.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Croman. Item 7, Waterfront Performance Measurement Program. Jeanette?
Yes, item 7, Waterfront Performance Measurement Program. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a staff presentation on the Waterfront Department's Performance Measurement Program.
Mr. Bossi.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As part of last month's report on the annual budget, a number of questions came up about the city's performance measurement system, as well as the Waterfront Department's component of that. And there was some interest in receiving a report on the overall performance measurement system that the city employs. So that is what I am here to do today, or this evening, I should say. The performance measurement system is commonly known as P3, and that stands for the Paradise Performance Program. And this program was started back in 2002 with the arrival of our former city administrator, Jim Armstrong. And it had there were a number of reasons for it. To promote long-term planning, to improve program efficiency and effectiveness, and to evaluate those results, as well as identify opportunities for improvement, and to make sure that what the city, the various departments and divisions in the city were doing aligned with council's goals for the city of Santa Barbara. It's a very important part of the citywide budget process, as well as management reviews and supervisor reviews, and it is also available online, again, as part of our budget program, and it can be found on our city's website under the finance department. Now, the P3 program, as it is known, provides staff with two different types of reports. The first is what's known as the key management indicator reports, and I'm going to get into both of these reports in a second. So the key management indicator reports are used to assess the health and overall productivity of a work unit. They're primarily used by managers as well as supervisors and obviously the directors. But it's a way to hold managers, supervisors, and directors accountable for the health and productivity of their work unit. The second type of report are the performance measurement reports, and these are individualized to each department and each program within that department. So our management indicator reports, again, assess the health and productivity of a work unit, and to do this, the reports include our use of sick leave, lost hours due to injury, vehicle collisions, and timeliness of employee evaluations. That means everybody's on an annual evaluation program, and we've got to submit these in a timely manner by their due date. So these are all part of our management indicators, and when we look at those individually, big picture, use of sick leave. The city average is 58 hours. The Waterfront Department is 51 hours. And all of these, the attachment number 1 to your report is our summary of our management indicators report that comes to our director as well as managers every year. The next on the list is our lost hours to injury. Last year, fiscal year 14, we had a total of almost 2,100 lost hours due to a number of department injuries, both in Harbor Patrol as well as facilities. A number of people were out for a significant amount of time. Vehicle accidents, this is another measure that we use, and we had 8 total vehicle accidents. Thankfully, they were all minor in nature. As you can imagine, with our parking staff as well as our Harbor Patrol, they are out and about all the time. We have a very large employee base for our parking program, and these are things like opening a door and hitting something stationary that puts a ding in the car, along those lines. So we report those, and we manage those and get them fixed. Thankfully, again, nothing significant. As far as our evaluations go, we had 39 out of 40, or 98% of our evaluations were completed on time. I believe the one that wasn't was on leave, so it didn't really factor into the overall. Well, it did factor into the overall basis, but. Now for the second type of report is our performance measures. There are a number of different types of objectives, and this is the second attachment in this report. It's quite lengthy. I believe it's around 30 pages, but it gives you every measure that we review with the Waterfront Department. First is our project objectives, and those are specific one-time projects or milestones within a larger project that we propose to be completed in the fiscal year that we set those up for. We also have measurable objectives, and those are criteria that have data to back them up, and the outcome is generally under the control of the particular program. And lastly, we have other performance measures, and those are used to track overall trends. If they don't fit into the top 2, we'll throw them down into other performance measures. And a lot of these, the outcome is not necessarily controlled by the particular program. It might also rely on another department, and so it's some of those projects and programs that are cross-departmental. So with that, when we look at the city as a whole, in fiscal year 2014, the city of Santa Barbara accomplished 734 of their 878 objectives. That's a success rate of 84%. As for the Waterfront Department, separating us out, we accomplished 34 of our 38 objectives, or 87%, so just above the city average. In addition to those, actually it's 39 objectives, I'm sorry, as I look at that. Our waterfront tracked an additional 66 other workload measures during the fiscal year. So these are things that we monitor all the time. We submit quarterly reports to the city administrator, so we're constantly reviewing these. We bring up new ones, toss out old ones as the years go on. And so each fiscal year brings some new ones, and old ones are dumped off the document. For the Waterfront Department, we have 8 programs with measurable program and project objectives: administration, property management, financial management, parking services, Harbor Patrol, marina management. We lump our facilities program, the Stearns Wharf side as well as the harbor side, we lump that as one, and then we have our capital programs. Some of the highlights that we think are impressive, not to toot our own horn, but the Harbor Patrol responded to 97% of their in-harbor emergencies within 5 minutes. That's quite a good response rate. I believe it was 95 of 98 responses. So there were 98 responses by emergency responses by Harbor Patrol this year. Parking, and I've talked about this when we go over our budget numbers. Our parking, our annual operating expense was 29% of the revenue collected. In the past, that's been as high as 50, 55, but with the installation of our Luke system, as we had hoped, our operating costs have gone down. And from fiscal year 11, it was 49.5, and we've gone all the way down to what you see up there is 29%. So we continue to see a savings in our operating expenses in parking. In addition, parking returned 99% of the phone calls that they receive on a daily basis within 24 hours. You might think, okay, a couple hundred phone calls. They returned 1,433 phone calls out of 1,439. So these folks are getting called on a very regular basis, and they're timely in their response. Facilities, one of the highlights, they rebuilt 8 20-foot marina slip fingers in Marina 2. They also achieved 88% of in-service days for their harbor patrol fleet. That's quite impressive when you take into account that patrol boat number 2 actually had their engines replaced in November and December. And then you take into account patrol boat number 3 had a new rudder installed and the hull re-welded. So these aren't small little things, a polishing here, a polishing there. These are major events that take those boats out of service, and yet still they achieved 88% of their in-service days. As far as capital programs are concerned, our facilities folks completed 85% of their minor capital projects, so 22 out of the 26. And a minor capital project, as you may well remember, is a capital project under $100,000. So not only do they have the big ones to monitor and control, but they also complete 22 out of their 26. So quite a high rate of success right there. And that is a very brief overview of our performance measurement system. Again, it's something we monitor on a regular basis, submit quarterly reports to our city administrator, and it's something that we're all, graded on, I guess, for lack of a better word, as managers and supervisors. And it's a good tool to keep tabs on everything. And this, again, is through the entire city organization, every department. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Any questions? Commissioner Banthlen.
Thanks, Mr. Bossy. I just wanted to say thank you for that report. I appreciated all the nice detail. So it was really nice to see that.
Commissioner Sloan.
I just have a couple of questions. One is on the hours lost due to injury. I assume there's a corrective action program that goes along with that. I know one of those injuries was in apprehending a suspect. I remember hearing about that. But when we have an injury like that, is there something that I assume that there's a program we put in place to prevent it from happening in the future, so maybe you can just talk about what that is.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, there are several things we can, these are lost hours due to work comp injuries suffered on the job. And this year, or actually, we're looking at 2014 here, not the current year. But we had several years of no injuries in the Harbor Patrol unit. And unfortunately, 2014, we had 2 pretty serious ones, one of which you referred to, and another back injury. Quite a few years ago now, we had a series of back injuries in the Harbor Patrol unit. So we put a davit on the Boat 3. So when pulling an anchor out in the anchorage, an abandoned anchor or something, or moving a shoaling buoy or something like that, instead of using back power, we've got the winch to do that. Also, we had an injury on Boat 4, which is our rigid-hulled inflatable, and you ride it sort of like a motorcycle or something, and the officer came down hard on his back and had a back injury from that. So we purchased an ergonomic, specially designed seat for that. So, and we'll constantly do safety meetings in the facilities division, and, try and do the best we can at reducing the lost hours by bringing the folks back on modified duty. And if the doctor will clear them for modified duty, we'll put them at a desk job like a patrol officer, probably not in uniform, but going around and doing other types of work on the docks that they can do, checking CF registrations and skiff permits and things like that. In facilities, we'll place them sometimes in a parking kiosk or something, just so that they're not, they're getting paid anyway, but it's better for us if we can get them on modified duty. So we've been working really aggressively on that. So we do try and, be proactive on preventing these things from happening. It was kind of a bad year last year.
Yeah, I noticed that we had one in 12 too, and so that's what brought it. And I know there are corrective action stuff. I just thought it was important to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Item 8, review of the Clean Marina. Go ahead.
Item 8, annual review, Clean Marina Program. recommendation that Harbor Commission review and consider an annual report on the department's Clean Marina program.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, it's my pleasure to bring you this year's annual Clean Marina report. As you know, we've had a Clean Marina program since 2002, and in modesty, not leading the way, I'm going to tell you we've had the longest standing Clean Marina program in California. In fact, the industry-wide program didn't come till 2006. You'll hear a little bit about that later. And so we annually report to you, and you review and ask questions and give suggestions and guidance, and we go from there. It has 6 program elements. I could read them to you now, but we're going to go through them one by one, and so I'll save my breath to cool my soup, as my grandma used to say. Facilities for boaters is the first of the 6. So we have sewage pump outs. We always review the number of minutes that the sewage pump outs were used, just to make sure that they're working and that they're available to the public. In FY14, the use was about 80% of the 12-year average, on par with FY13. It's a lot of minutes when you think about 5,500 minutes use of the sewage pump outs. And this last year, we rebuilt pump outs at Marina One West and Sea Landing, so we're always staying on top of the repairs, and we're DBA and the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Foundation. There's a consortium of government and NGO agencies and organizations that keep us on our toes by inspecting the sewage pump outs every year and testing the timing and how well they're pumping and what have you. So we're happy to say that it's working well and being used. We're also one of the 2 harbors in Southern California that have a bilge water pump out facility. Ours is at the fuel dock. It removed 4,635 gallons last year. It's 85% of our 11-year average. I could have cooked it a little here and said it was 93% of our 12-year average, but as you see in 2008, the meter broke, so that wouldn't have been really fair. But it's used consistently. It's a little bit of an uptick, but you can see since 2010, it's got pretty steady use. And it's my perspective, and I know my colleagues join me, and this is one of the primary reasons you don't see oily sheen on the harbor anymore is the bilge water pump out, along with our fairly rigorous compliance and enforcement program. Debris nets, we've been talking about this for years. We replace parts equivalent to about 10 nets in 2014. We have 40 of them around the harbor. You see them. The number the number has gone up a little bit in the last few years, as you'll see in your staff report. It's steady at around 10. That's a function of the nets aging. We just need to replace the mesh and sometimes the aluminum parts as well. Waste oil disposal. So we have 3 free waste oil disposal stations at Marina 2, Marina 4, and the fuel dock. As you can see, they take oil filters, bilge pads, and antifreeze. They don't take gasoline, and they don't take soap and things like that. FY14 was 2,500 gallons. It's interesting. This was below average for reasons we're not entirely clear about. It's about a third of what it was in the previous year. Now, we're not having oil spills, and so we've really been sifting through our paperwork to see if there was an accounting error of some kind. We haven't been able to find one, but rest assured, we're actually regrouping on our accounting and taking a different run at this in case some accounting error was made. But like I said, there haven't been any oil spills. Maybe people are, it would be speculative. Maybe people are doing less maintenance on their boat for one reason or another. I really don't have a clear answer for you on why that dropped somewhat this year. But next year, I think we'll look at it again, and maybe we'll have a better understanding. Marine battery collection. We've been collecting batteries for several years, since 2009. And last year was 220 batteries were collected for recycling. That's the bin that's in front of, at the end of the fuel dock, and it's pretty much on par with the last year. It has gone down over the years. I'm not exactly sure why, but it seems to have stabilized at about 220. It's a locked facility now, and it has to be opened up by the fuel dock. But before, when it was an open facility, people were stealing all the batteries out of it. So there's some kind of equilibrium going on here. I'm not sure exactly, what that equation looks like. But, stealing batteries for their core charge, for their core Rebate is one thing, but some folks were stealing batteries to use in boats out in the anchorage and stuff, which just makes it a more dangerous place for people. So it's a locked facility now operated by the fuel dock. Fishing line recycling. So we have two, used to be three, but we have two monofilament fishing line recycling stations. One is at Stearns Wharf Bait and Tackle out by Frank Drew's place. That's pictured on the left. And on the right, you see the one that was installed last year on the fishing vessel Stardust. Now, we're very excited about this. In 2014, 8 pounds of monofilament were deposited on Stearns Wharf, and 25 pounds from the fishing vessel Stardust alone. That's 25 pounds of monofilament that otherwise would go into the seaway when folks clip off bits of mono, and it traditionally just went in the ocean. But they have this facility right here. And so talking to the vessel's owner, they use it. They use it on a regular basis, and the message is being advanced by the deckhands. And we're very proud and happy the way this has worked out. I reminded many years ago Charlie Watson, when we were developing this program, Commissioner Charlie Watson said the key is bring the facilities and the accommodations to the people as close as you can. And that has stuck with us, and it's a good lesson learned. This is a classic example of you put a recycling station right in front of the fishermen on the boat where they have nowhere else to go. They're going to use it. Water quality monitoring. So in dry season, we don't monitor in the wet season, as you know, because we have a lot of runoff from watersheds, and you wouldn't get a clear understanding of what was point source pollution, what was non-point source pollution. So we use 3 bacterial indicators, total coliform, fecal coliform, and Enterococcus. And none of the samples taken from the 7 sites tested between April and October last year exceeded limits for body contact per state standards. However, that being said, last November at the Marina One restroom, we did have a modest sewage spill where an elbow in the sewer line cracked and an estimated 100 gallons of sewage poured into the bay. It was immediately shut off. All the emergency response agencies were notified. That includes Cal Fish and Wildlife, the state's emergency management agency, Public Works, Environmental Health. We have this laundry list. They were all notified immediately, plus all our dive service businesses in the harbor were notified immediately. And then we set up a water quality testing program the day of the spill, and then we tested that day, the day after, and 4 days later on November 17th. The results were that 2 of the samples of the day of the spill exceeded state standards, and the rest of the other tests, all the stations, and you can see them here, there were no exceedances. So station C, right here where the cursor is, that's where the spill occurred, and our other sampling stations were D, B, and A. And A you can almost consider a control station because it's so far away and so close to the harbor mouth. So the bad news is that we had a modest spill. The good news is our SOPs for notification and repair and sampling all went perfectly. We also test the water quality at East Beach. This is part of our Coastal Commission permit requirement for establishing the mooring area out there. It's tested twice a year for heavy metals and 3 times a year for bacteria. Again, in 2014, the samples were consistent with baseline good clean water samples in 2006. And the great news here is if the samples continue to test quote unquote clean for the next 2 years, the 10-year testing requirement will be waived. It was a 10-year agreement, and that will result in an $8,000 annual savings to the Clean Marina program and the Waterfront Department. Dissolved oxygen tests. As you know, algae blooms have an effect on our dissolved oxygen levels in the harbor. Then they can cause fish die-off in the traps and resulting in what the fishermen call dead loss. We tested the waters 12 times late in 2014 and early 2015. The results indicated mostly good DO levels, except in October and November, both of which resulted in less than adequate levels. And we immediately, as per our protocols, posted all the marina gates so fishermen and anybody else who wants to know, but especially fishermen, could take their receivers of lobster and crab, and lobster at $22 a pound to the fishermen is a pretty important item. They could take them outside of the harbor if they wanted to, where they're likely to get less dead loss and better DO levels. But we had no fish die-offs in 2014. Occasionally, along the marina, along Brophy Brothers and the Maritime Museum and the Breakwater Restaurant right along there and along the marina too, you'd see anchovies kind of doing the side swim or gilling a lot to take in food and oxygen, and it's kind of an indication of low dissolved oxygen levels. This is not unrelated to what we saw in the fall. So each night, go home, cross your fingers that we wouldn't have a fish die off, but I wish to respectfully remind you that we do have an emergency fish die-off response plan ready to go if we do indeed experience a die-off like they've had in Ventura and especially in Marina del Rey in 2013. Anti-fouling paints. Boy, this has been a long and interesting journey for not only us but all the harbors in California. We could have a complete different session on this one, which please don't ask us to do because it gets long and technical and way beyond my ability, my pay grade to understand the biochemistry of it. But that being said, the state, since 2008, 2009 has undertaken significant efforts to reduce the amount of copper that is, this goes back to the old sailing days, putting copper sheets on boats. That's copper paint. But indications in the water quality, water column and in the sediments of several harbors indicated that, maybe there's another direction to go. Maybe we should be testing other hull coatings. Zinc has been one. A ceramic coating has been another. That's just a slippery type deal where the barnacles and other growth have a difficult time attaching. Or we've tried non-metallic biocides that the little barnacles and what have you, bugs don't like to attach to. We've tried just about all of them. So I just want to run through where we're at with each of our patrol boats because we figure if anybody needs to lead by example, it's us on our patrol boats. But the caveat there is this. Our patrol boats have a unique kind of duty. They don't sit in the slip for months on end without being used. They don't zoom around the ocean at 25 knots. There's a lot of low-speed, high-cavitation propulsion on those boats. Slip check, responding to emergencies, tows, and what have you. And so it's a special kind of use that takes a special kind of coating. Quite frankly, copper's been the best, but we've tried the following. On boat 3, that's our 33-foot aluminum boat, we tried zinc-based paint. It has had limited success. It's not very durable. It may have to do with, a bad relationship between aluminum and zinc. We're not entirely sure, but it hasn't performed that well. It's peeled and cracked under normal working conditions. So we switched to a non-metallic biocide, a brand named Econia, in 2012. We had very limited success and availability with it, too, so we don't intend to reapply it. We're still in the hunt and peck mode. We have two colleagues who went to an AFP workshop about a month ago, and the takeaway for them was not much has changed on this front. The paint manufacturers are you can imagine what's in it for them, right? If they come up with the silver bullet, they stand to make millions and billions. But they haven't come up with the silver bullet yet, and so we're standing by and trying to use what's available. But I will tell you that these paints, one of the reasons that Carl's in-service boat time was 86%, it would probably be over 90% were it not for the fact that we had to repaint these boats much more frequently than ideally we would like to. So, but we're out there, we're still trying, and we're still looking, and we've got our finger to the pulse. On Patrol Boat 2, we tried several non-metallic coatings, and this next bullet speaks to. We have to repaint every 4 to 6 months. Very expensive paint. The haul-out's expensive. The whole ordeal's expensive. And, of course, it leaves the patrol fleet down a boat for a while, which is not ideal either, especially a fireboat. So we've returned to copper-based paint in Patrol Boat 2, and Patrol Boat 1 has sort of been our control group on this whole exercise. It's copper, and we don't have any reason to change it from copper right now until something's out there that's going to work, one size fits all. So we also participate in the multi-state industry-sponsored certification program called the Clean Marina Program. So we have these dual Clean Marina programs going on. It was established in 2004. They've now certified 127 marinas. It's kind of neat because it's industry sponsored and industry driven, industry inspected. It's all industry. Government kind of oversees it, checks in with it, but it's all industry doing the right thing for the right reasons. We were certified in 2006. We got recertified in 2011, and we will be recertified again next year. These folks are leading advocates for alternative AFPs. So they have a Clean Marina Committee, and that's my go-to, sort of my divining rod, always leads back to this Clean Marina program when it comes to any breakthroughs on alternative anti-fouling paints. Best management practices. So all hull cleaning companies, as you know, have been certified in BMPs for minimizing paint sloughing into the harbor. See very few copper plumes in the harbor these days because they're very, very careful with the pads they use, the way they use them, the frequency they use them. And boaters also know that sometimes it's better just to haul out to the boatyard and have your boat cleaned rather than risk creating a copper plume in the harbor where you'd have more problems than you'd want. And our officers are similarly trained. Those certifications are 5-year certifications. Oil absorbent pad distribution. This one's really been a huge benefit in combination with the bilge water pump out facility. The pads, folks use them to mop up the bilges and prevent leaks when they're fueling. And we used to have them stacked in the foyer of our office, but folks would say thank you and walk out with a stack like this. So finally, we keep them behind the counter, and it's the, kind of the index finger thumb test. But still, we distributed 15,000 of these in FY14, same as FY13. But the number that kind of amazes me is we've given away almost 200,000 absorbent pads since 2003. And these things work really, really well. So again, this and the bilge pump out, I believe, are the reasons we don't see as many oil sheens or leaks into the harbor. Bird rescues. We coordinate with the Wildlife Care Network on this, just the way we coordinate with the Marine Mammal Center on marine mammal rescues. And this measure, if you will, was implemented in FY11. And it went steadily up all the way to 115 last year, bird rescues. And if you look at the Salad Boat report, the Cushman report, you'll see that the dead bird count mirrors the rescued bird count because sometimes, we don't get to them or we're not called to them in time. And now it has precipitously dropped off to 38 in FY14. And again, in the Salad Boat report, you'll see very few dead birds taken by them and so far in FY15 as well. I'm not an expert in this field, but this data hopefully is helpful to those who are, because we're in the job of rescuing injured animals and turning them over to the rescue organizations that can rehabilitate them. But I think it's kind of interesting information to keep track of. Marine mammal rescues. So as I said, we coordinate with the Marine Mammal Center. And as you know, we've had a huge number of rescues in calendar year 15 since January. Most of you probably saw Nick Welch's article in The Independent today. It was a cover story on the marine mammal problem, if you will. So through March, we had rescued 54 marine mammals. And all of calendar year 14, we had only gotten 45, rescued 45. And in 13, it was 49, and in 12, it was 43. So those numbers are pretty static. This year is anomalous. The go-to answer that people seem to be advancing is warmer water temperatures mean less forage fish for the sea lions. And as a result, they don't have enough strength, energy, milk, and ability to feed their young, and the juveniles especially seem to be perishing, though we are seeing a number of adults that are meeting their demise this year as well. So that's a high number through March, and we only hope it tapers off. Pollution prevention and abatement. So the Salad Boat I mentioned. So we have this contractor, it's Cushman, contracting company, who goes out every other week and removes litter and debris from the harbor, and also after storms or harbor events or anything that creates a lot of litter in the harbor. Well, in March of last year, we had a huge tide and swell event, and tons of kelp, holdfasts from which were already weakened by the warming water temperatures, pushed into the harbor, and as a result, Cushman's laborers, if you will, spent 187 hours removing it. You'll see this pop up again in our financials because it had a big effect on our bottom line financially this year. In dry weather, the Debris tends to pile up near the launch ramp. That's just where it eddies. That's just due to the tidal circulation in the harbor and where it ends up. It also tends to end up on the west-facing fingers of Marina 1. That seems to be a comb that catches it as well. In wet weather, most of the debris comes out of the storm drains on the north side of the harbor by Marinas 2 and 3. And it's the typical stuff you'd expect: aluminum cans, newspapers, buckets, kelp, tree limbs, plastic bags, tennis balls, cigarettes, snack wrappers, styrofoam. Nothing really surprising, but still a nuisance and a reminder for folks to not leave anything near the storm drains or let things into the storm drains or our creeks that's going to end up in the ocean. And this is from the 2014 event, so you can see maybe why it took 187 hours. Almost all the boats, especially on the eastern end of Marina 1, were landlocked. They couldn't leave their slip. This kelp you see on the surface went down 4 or 5 feet, and it was quite an effort to get rid of it. So abandoned watercraft abatement grants and funds. So we're currently working with a $10,000 AWAF grant. You've heard that term before. And we continually chase these grants. As soon as we're nearing the end of one or exhausted one, we're applying to the Division of Boating and Waterways for another. We have a great relationship with them. We were in at the beginning, and we're still going at it. So, like I say, our relations are good, and we expect to have continued grants going forward. Although they're diminishing in amount each year because more and more agencies are realizing this is not a difficult grant application process, and it's easy to get these grants for a good purpose. So we only had 3 beached boats disposed of in FY14, which is well below our 9-year average of 8. But in FY15, after the December storms, we removed 6 more. So that give you a heads up as to what you'll hear next year, because this number is going to go up. The vessel turn-in program, also from the Division of Boating and Waterways, is designed to allow people to surrender their boats, voluntarily surrender them, so they don't end up in the East Beach anchorage abandoned and on East Beach, endangering the environment and costing money and creating public safety hazards. So we're working with an $8,800 VTIP grant that we have until 2016. We disposed of 1 vessel in FY13, but 9 in FY14, and it's my intuition. Actually, I'm pretty squared away on this. I think several of these vessels were a function of slip permit transfers, where instead of abandoning a boat somewhere or selling it for $1 to somebody, people did the right thing when they were putting, like new boat, new partner, when they're putting a new boat in a slip and transferring, putting a new, adding a partner and ultimately transferring the slip. What they did is they came to us and said, will you help us get rid of the boat that's in the slip now? So this program is working very, very well. In fact, DBA's now combined the 2 programs, AWAF and VTIP, and the next time we apply for a grant, it'll be a combined grant of these 2. Operation Clean Sweep, you heard from me tonight. I won't double down on that. We'd love to see folks on May 2nd for our 9th annual Clean Sweep. This is another Clean Sweep picture. I got a lot of these, but there's a variety of them. Outreach and education. So we disseminate a lot of Clean Marina information. It's in our foyer. We distribute it via dock lines and Clean Marina Corner articles, the Log newspaper. We educate boaters by directly giving them what we call pollution packets that include literature from the Coastal Commission and the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Foundation and all kinds of agencies and non-government organizations. They're all about boating clean and green. In fact, we have a staff member, our harbor operations assistant, will be at our staff table at the Harbor Nautical Swap Meet disseminating information there. He's our designated dock walker. He's been trained to be a boating clean and green literature and information specialist, and he'll be at the Nautical Swap Meet. So we have events that relate to this too. Again, the swap meet, we have our hazmat truck, widely publicized. We sent a press release for this year's on the 14th. I hope everybody's seen that. If you have any question, just email them or you call me. And we also have the truck there to pick up the household hazardous waste and used oil drop-off. So compliance and enforcement, the hammer. So before the hammer, actually, come the marine sanitation device inspections, MSDs, portable toilets or marine toilets. So this is required for all visiting vessels plus new slip and liveaboard permit assignments. In FY14, we inspected 704. It's slightly up from FY13. We had more visitors. I don't want to put it all on Carl, but I think some of it is related to the fact that we had an off year in the Marina One construction project, and we had so the whole harbor wasn't filled with relocated boats. But you can see we're going pretty steady on that over the last few years, and it's folks comply. I can't remember the last time we saw a dye plume in the harbor from a violation there. Pollution violations. We like to think that we're education heavy and badge light. We issued no citation last year. That's the lowest in the 10 years of tracking. We finally got to 0. We issued 7 warnings, which was also the lowest in 10 years of tracking. So we're pretty confident that the culture of responsibility continues to take hold in the harbor, and folks are doing the right thing. Though I'll advise you now, you're going to see a couple more citations when I give you this report next year based on early 15. But in general, we're moving in the right direction. And these trend lines, I think, speak volumes. And that concludes my report, except for the financials. Here's where looking at this, and this is our adjusted costs. This is total costs minus grant-funded costs. And we see $58,210. That's our real cost to the Waterfront Department to operate the Clean Marina program. Now, for a matter of speaking, if you were to subtract the $24,000 that single event costs and the 187 labor hours that went into it with the high tide and kelp issue that Cushman had to deal with in March, that $58,000 would be $34,000, which would keep us direct, right in line with the previous year's steady, stable costs of our Clean Marina program. I'm not saying to do that. It is what it is. It costs an extra $24,000 to set the boats free and clean the harbor up. But that's the reason $58,000 compared to $38,000 the past year. And I apologize. This is the real conclusion. We believe this program continues contributing to the department's overall mission, and its annual costs, notwithstanding what I just told you, remain stable. And we believe it continues to highlight the importance of maintaining a clean ocean environment for anyone who visits, works, or recreates in Santa Barbara Harbor, as well as the marine and avian life that depend on it to thrive. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mick. Any questions? Commissioner Webb.
Thank you for your report, Mick. I have a question about the salad boat in that event. Why was that $133 an hour for them to do that work?
Overtime, extra work. It's in their contract. They have a standard hourly rate. I think it's $87 an hour. Then they have an extra hours rate for being called out in times that are not the typical every other Saturday times. The rate goes up.
And are there more people working on that at that hourly rate? A boat operator and then a couple other people?
Commissioner
lifting?
Webb, yes. Yeah, the 187 hours was piled into, I want to say, 4 to 5 days. So there were a bunch of people working on it because our goal, my phone was ringing off the hook, our goal was to free the boats, and clean up the harbor. And we're duty-bound to do that. I will tell you, they did a great job. There was nothing left when they were through.
Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you very much for the report, Mick. I mean, I'm sure it took many, many hours to put it together. I always look forward to it. It's really good about the fishing line, and I'm wondering whether containers could be put on other party fishing boats in addition to the Starburst. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, we only have one party fishing boat at Sea Landing. We have whale watching boats and dive boats and what have you. Could it be done at other landings and other harbors up? Yes, it could, and we have pushed the state to encourage that because the state are the folks that we work with. You saw those stickers on the box. Those are all the stickers the state likes us to promote, the agencies that contribute to giving us that equipment and what have you. And we have encouraged them to promote it in other marinas.
That's great. It's a stunning amount of fishing line.
It is.
And I was wondering if there's a way of tracking how many calls that you get. I know this would be more in the metric thing than the number of calls you get for wildlife and the amount of responses, because I hear really positive things from the wildlife care people of your harbor patrol guys going out and helping, and I think it would be interesting to know.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kramer, we could do that. It's possible. Is it plausible? A little hard. Here's why. Not all the calls are, some of them are F and U, as the expression goes, the acronym goes, or U and F. What is it, unfounded or false and unfounded? Oh. Yeah, in other words, people see what they think is a sick sea lion, and because people have big hearts, right? And so we go down there to deal with it, and by the time we get there, the animal was swum into the ocean, or, you know, Pete Holworth poked it with a stick and it ran away, or what have you. So same thing with birds. You know, people, you know how the birds sometimes will tuck their beaks into, you know, and rest on the water? People oftentimes mistake that for distressed animals and will call us, and we'll go check it out. And if it is distressed, we'll call. But so there are a lot of false calls. So it would tend to be a pretty challenging tracking issue to take the false ones and separate them from the verified ones. I think the information we're giving you here is about the limit of our ability to inform on that issue.
Thanks for the explanation. But I also just want to call out and thank the Harbor Patrol guys for the responses, because it's really heartening.
I will pass that on if they don't watch the tape.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mick.
Sure.
Very, very thorough. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I just had one more thing to add relative to this report, and that is I wanted to extend my thanks both to Teresa Lawler, our engineering technician, and to Ms. Brzezinski, who both assisted me compiling information, you know, all the whole deal. This is not all a Mick Kronman product, so thank you.
Thanks, the village.
As I told Mr. Brzezinski this afternoon, it's my favorite report of the whole thing that you do, so thank you again.
All right. Without any other questions, Mr. Reedman, that brings us to Commission staff communications.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, as we heard from a member of the public at the beginning of the meeting on this issue, I just wanted to point out that we sent you all an email this morning outlining the dialogue between the Waterfront Department and U.S. Coast Guard Long Beach, L.A. sector. And so you can see through the email chain the communications that have been going on since this incident was first reported to us. And I think that it's important to keep in mind as we move forward with this issue between the elevated terrorist threat, the cruise ships, and the security and enforcement that the Coast Guard Department of Homeland Security is responsible for. So, Mick, do you have anything to add to that? Mick Kronman has been our point person on this issue.
It did appear to be a perfect storm of events converging at one time to bring up a situation like that.
Mr. Chair, I don't have much to add other than to tell you that moving forward, we intend to meet with, convene, dialogue, discuss with the Coast Guard, the Yacht Club, the Princess Cruise Lines, fishermen, and what have you, reconvene, look at the charts, see what can be feasibly done. I'll tell you right now, 3 miles isn't going to work because it is way too far offshore. It would have too many negative impacts on the passengers, the tenders, and what have you. But that being said, we were this afternoon, the Harbor Patrol Supervisor, Captain Steve McCullough, and I were plotting possible angles and moves and what have you, and looking at the yacht club's race buoys, and we've already begun that thinking process, and the dialogue will follow. But rest assured, this isn't an issue that's going to go away soon, and we got our arms around it.
I greatly appreciate the swift response and the seriousness that your office has taken on. I also can appreciate the difficulty in coordinating multiple agencies, particularly when they start at the highest level of the federal, to all the way down to ourselves. So much appreciated. Anything further? Commissioner Webb.
I also want to thank you for your due diligence on this, and that we've opened some communication in a delicate situation. I know things cannot often be communicated, but I think just alerting people is the best we can do, and information will, I think, create more of a safety situation. So onward and upward. Thank you.
Very good. Unless there's anything else, I'd like to adjourn. I'd call for a motion to adjourn. So put forth. A second. First and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Somewhere